I guess I just would ask, Mr. Chairman, unanimous consent to enter that memo into the record.
Thanks, Mike. I'll take it from here. These are what's referred to as the Wilson-Davis documents, and I'm about to break them down for you. And you're going to want to get familiar with these things, because my prediction is they're going to come up in the next congressional hearing because they came up in the last one. And these notes have been submitted to the congressional record, and they supposedly recount a conversation that occurred between Admiral Thomas Wilson and Eric Davis. And you can even download a copy of them for yourself from a .gov website just by searching Wilson-Davis notes. So you can either read the 13 pages of these notes, or you can watch about 22 minutes of me recreating them. And I even got my family to help me out. And you won't believe how receptive they were when I asked them if they'd be willing to help me. And may I add that I'm not an actor and there is hardly any budget put into this effort. And since I don't have any direct inside information from the people that are in these notes, it's going to be hard for me to say if I think they're true or not. But I lean towards they're true. But the implications of these being true is huge, because they do depict a rumor that's been circulating around the UFO community for a long time, which is that the US government has outsourced the UFO investigation to outside contractors so that it's FOIA exempt, but they've lost control of it. And they touch on everything from UFO crash retrieval programs to alien bodies. And the guy that was trying to get control back over the program is Admiral Thomas Wilson, who has a long distinguished career in the military as well as the intelligence community. And he even went on to be the director of national intelligence. And he tried to get to the bottom of this, but wasn't successful. And this is my attempt at recreating the conversation that he had with astrophysicist Eric Davis, who has a long history and interest in the UFO topic. And he was even contracted by OSAP to write a paper on wormholes. He was also one of the founding members of the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, which was founded by astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And these notes leaked from Ed Mitchell's estate upon his death. But Admiral Wilson has denied any involvement in this conversation, which is exactly one of the things that he says later in this interview. One of the names that pops up early in the conversation is Oke Shannon, who actually has just recently had an interview posted on Project Unity that you should really check out. So imagine, if you will, that you're at the EG&G parking lot in Las Vegas, waiting on a meeting to start. Good morning. The minute I saw your resume, the Air Force orders, and the physics paper Rich gave me, I knew who you were. I put 2 and 2 together and figured out who you were. You don't want to talk about my career or my DIA history, do you? No, actually not. I remember a phone call with Oke Shannon in fall of '99. I'm a big Oke Shannon fan. We go back years in the Navy before Oke left for Los Alamos National Labs. Oke talked for 2 hours trying to convince me to talk to you about what he told Will Miller in '97, about that Boston Globe story by Leslie Kean. Yep, the UFO topic, crashed, retrieved UFO craft and bodies, and a secret government organization similar to Majestic 12. What was said during the conversation? He confirmed that Stephen Greer, Will Miller, and Edgar Mitchell gave a talk in the Pentagon conference room. Admiral Mike Crawford and General Pat Hughes were present along with others back in April '97. After the group broke up, Miller and I talked privately for 2 hours on UFOs, MJ-12, Roswell, crashed UFOs, alien bodies, and everything. I was intrigued. I knew about intelligence on U.S. military close encounters with UFOs and foreign government encounters too. I told Miller I've seen the records. Yeah, I called Will Miller in June of '97. He asked questions about MJ-12, the UFO cabal, crashed UFOs. So I told him that he was right. There is such an organization in existence. What did you tell him? I found it. Where I looked, who I talked to, but I didn't name everyone. That's it. Will you please evaluate this letter that Will Miller wrote me and tell me what you think? I didn't tell Miller everything. Miller knows what I did in the Pentagon Records group, but no more. Miller can make a good educated guess on which defense contractor has the alien hardware. Don't pay Miller for information. He sounds hard up for cash to pay for a nice Florida home and private beach privileges. Miller can give good advice on which defense companies to look at. That's all he knows.
I talked to Oak about you. He said you're a team player, that you keep your mouth shut. No media connections, you'd obey all restrictions, and although you're not in the government and have no clearances, your pedigree is excellent. Your professional and personal references are excellent. I told Oke Shannon it's a bad time, that there is no good time to talk to you. I'm just too busy. But speaking of a bad time, Oak is difficult to contact these days. Heard he's in and out of the hospital. He's sensitive to stress. It's bad. I tried calling him, but his wife Linda is only taking messages, but no calls are returned. She doesn't want much on Oak's plate. I didn't say yes or no to his request to meet with you, just said I'd think on it. 3 years passed and I'm retiring. I left the DIA in July '02 and was replaced by Admiral Jacoby. I made a trip to the test site special area to wrap up some projects I started in '98. The trip was set up by the National Nuclear Security Agency by Rich and Doug. You know them, AFIO members. They told me how the new Las Vegas chapter needed guest speakers for a public venue to raise money. Rich and Doug talked to me about you, sent me your NASA papers and other related stuff. Wormholes are kind of your thing, huh? When was that? September '98, after Labor Day. Rich and Doug told me I should talk to you about DIA careers, discuss history, mission, my career in the DIA, everything. I knew better later. When I saw your papers and the stats they provided, then I remembered Oak's phone call and what he said about you and what he sent me. What did you do with it? I had my office do background checks. Doug and Rich offered to, but I wanted my own data just to be sure. The AFIO people vouched for you, as well as the DC people that are in Vegas now. I gave it deep, serious thought. Recalled Oak's phone call in '99. Oak really supported you. He had good arguments. What were they? That you wouldn't talk to the press or UFO Twitter, that you don't have media connections, you won't talk to Miller or Greer or related folks, that you don't have a vested interest in publicity, money, fame, notoriety, and such. We spent time discussing my background. I answered his questions about my Air Force and NASA work experience. We chatted about my education and career choices. He didn't ask any questions about NIDS. Then he got angry when we discussed Will Miller betraying his trust. He violated both personal and professional trust, especially among intelligence colleagues, among Navy officers. There's a Navy camaraderie among officers. It's a brotherhood. He violated that confidentiality. How did he do that? Miller told Greer about our conversation. Who knows who else he and Greer told? Miller also told Ed Mitchell, who only told me in 1999. Then he talks to Leslie Keene and those Boston Globe articles came out. I'm not sure what he told Keene, but the articles reference me. I was furious. I got calls from all over. What was the nature of the calls? Sarcastic, stupid jokes, stupid comments. Comments of surprise and derision that I would even be talking to UFO nuts in the first place. Who was making those comments? Co-workers, flag officers in the Pentagon, lower staff, civilian senior executive service people, people in the intel community that I work with. I got calls about those articles, and I didn't like it. And I'm taking risks just by talking to you right now. But I trust Oak's word, and it's good with me. The three of us should have met face to face. But Oak's present health problems prevented that, which is too bad. So I'm taking a risk talking to you. Rich and Doug vouch for you. They say your word is good with them. AFIO connections are important for trust. They say you know how to be a team player. Your background name checks clear, your Korean record is good, and the Air Force trusts you. But I'm running out of time, so let's get on with this. If you blow my trust, I'll deny meeting you. Deny everything I said. I won't meet with any more people who don't have clearances to talk about this topic. It's too risky because of security violations by just mentioning it. Very tightly held info. Absurdly close held subject matter. Never seen anything like this program in the entire Black programs community. Okay. Well, then what happened between April and June of '97? After parting ways with Will Miller a week later, I made some phone calls, knocked on a few doors, talked to a few people. It went on like this for about 45 days. General M. Ward suggested that I go through the records group files in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology. I ran into Bill Perry in May of '97 and talked about this quietly, and he made some suggestions. They both told me about a special projects record group that doesn't belong to the usual special access program. They told me about a special subset of unacknowledged, carved out, waived programs that don't belong to the usual special access program division that were organized by Perry himself back in '94. They were set apart from the rest, but buried deep and covered by conventional special access programs. Who was the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology at that time? It was Paul Kaminsky. I talked about it to both Paul and Mike Kostanek. Mike Kostanek? Mike Kostanek. He's in Paul's office, the Director of Special Programs in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, which was organized by Perry back in '94. Mike is also the Director of the Special Access Programs Coordination Office, the Executive Secretary of the Special Access Programs Oversight Committee, and he's also a member of the Senior Review Group. Admiral Wilson was the Deputy Director of the DIA and Assistant Joint Chief of Staff J2 at the time of this conversation. His boss was the Director of the DIA, General Patrick Hughes. So I eventually found the unusual record group and read the index abstracts. Was it budget info? No, not budget info. That's kept in separate records for audit purposes. But a security budget record is copied into a folder for the program. I then talked to Mike, who said it was like 2 to 3 times the program budget, but then there were times when it was as high as 6 to 7 times the core budget. I thought it was absurdly high. Mike said Perry wanted an investigation on it, but was told to drop it. Who told him to drop it? He didn't want to answer my question on that. He said I could find out from Judy Daly. We spoke on the phone and she told me that the security and other program budget records were being revamped and relocated in their own records group. Security budgets were sometimes cumulative and not annual numbers. It's easy to get confused. 6 to 7 times the amount could be about 2 to 5 years if it was a cumulative total, but keep in mind that there have been errors in the way security budgets were reported. Perry ordered all these issues to be reorganized and straightened out to improve audit transparency. So what special access program compartment did you find it in? That's a core secret, I won't say. Can you tell me the code name? Again, I won't say. Core secret. Well, who's the project contractor or U.S. government agency that runs the program? An aerospace technology contractor, one of the top ones in the U.S. Who? Core secret. Can't tell. A defense contractor? Yeah, the best one of them. Intelligence, too. It's in their corporate portfolio. Come on, give me a hint. Sorry, no. So what happened when you found this mystery contractor? Well, I made several calls in May of '97, first to Paul, Mike, and Perry to confirm that I had identified the right contractor and found the right program manager to talk to. So did they confirm your assumptions? Yes. So then what happened? Later that same month, I made 3 phone calls to the program manager. One of them was a conference call with the security director and corporate attorney. There was a little confusion on their part about why I was looking for him and what I wanted from him and what it was I wanted to know. They all had a testy tone. What do you mean by that? They were surprised and agitated that I was calling. Were they agitated by what you asked them? Yeah. Well, what exactly did you ask them? I told them that I had read their program records in the OSDAT Special Program Records Group and wanted to know about their crashed UFO program. I told them that I wanted to know what their role in it was, what they had, and etc. I also asked if they had heard of MJ-12 or some other organization code relating to crashed or recovered UFO craft. Did they have a reaction on the phone to that? Yes. They asked who I had talked to before I called them, so I told them. And they weren't happy with that answer either. You mean about Bill Perry, Paul Kaminsky, and others? Oh no, I didn't tell them that I was talking to those guys. Well, who else did you talk to? There were the other program managers I called. You didn't mention that before. I thought I said something about them. Who were they? 3 program managers that said they weren't the ones I was looking for, and 4 program managers that referred me back to the first 3 program managers. Why the latter? Because they were part of it. They're all in the same records group, but their connection to each other is not obvious, which isn't unheard of, but it's unusual in a records group. Then what happened? I told the 3 program managers that I wanted them to give me a formal briefing, a tour, and everything. I was exploiting my regulatory authority as Deputy Director of the DIA and the Assistant Joint Chief of Staff, J2. I told them that me not already being briefed on their work was an oversight that they needed to correct. I demanded they right this wrong. They needed to discuss my demands amongst themselves, so I hung up. I got a call 2 days later, and they said they don't want to talk to me on the phone, so we arranged for a face-to-face meeting at their facility. Did you go? Hell yeah, I went. 10 days later, I flew out there. We met in their conference room in a secure vault. 3 of them showed up. The same 3 guys you had a teleconference with? Yeah, the same 3. The security director, the program director, and the corporate attorney. They called themselves the Watch Committee, or the Gatekeepers. Why those names? I asked them that same question. They said they were formed out of necessity to protect themselves after a near disaster in the past that almost blew their cover. It had something to do with an agreement that was reached with a couple of Pentagon senior executives overseeing special access programs in those days. They were vague about what had happened then. Let me finish. They said that years ago an audit investigation led to them, and that wasn't supposed to happen. They were nearly outed. A battle, a nasty back and forth between the Watch Committee, the auditor, and the auditor's Pentagon chief ensued. Like a tug-of-war for program transparency. They told me money was the issue. The Watch Committee trying to hide became the other issue. Some sort of threat was leveled at the auditor to blow the lid off of them, so they backed down and let the auditor in to complete his job. So what happened with that? The auditor was officially briefed, given a tour, and shown their program. Did they show him a craft or any hardware that they said was alien or from a UFO? They didn't say more about that, but after the episode, a formal agreement was struck with Pentagon people to prevent it from repeating in the future. So special rigorous access criteria was established in the agreement, which was set up by the contractor committee. No U.S. government personnel are to gain access to the program unless they met the criteria, which is to be administered by the program director, attorney, and security officer themselves, irregardless of the tickets and position the government personnel possessed. It's literally their way or the highway. What were their criteria? I asked for it, but they refused to give an answer. I was mad. The implication was clear to me. They operate without any official oversight or any justification, which is a politically dangerous place to be. He then told me that the contractor committee was concerned with who he had talked to at the Pentagon or elsewhere, and wanted accounting of those conversations because they were concerned about the new exposure. And I learned that him telling me about it was the purpose of the meeting. What? They weren't going to let me in the door. Why not? They said my tickets were all confirmed and valid, but I was not on the bigot list. I found out my tickets alone were not enough. I didn't meet the special criteria they defined. So need-to-know authorization was not being granted. I went back and forth with the security director and the attorney over these points. They wouldn't accept my argument that they fell under my statutory oversight and regulatory authority as the deputy director of the DIA. That their program should be under my purview, so I did have the need to know. They said that regulatory and statutory authority as deputy director of the DIA was not relevant nor pertinent to the nature of their program. Then they pulled out their bigot list to convince me otherwise. It was several pages long and originally dated 1990, but it had been updated in 93. Who was on it? Did you recognize any names? That's a core secret, but I am willing to say that most were program employees, civilians. I didn't recognize any military personnel names. Any politicians on the list? No White House names, not even the president. No congressional people, no congressional staffers. Any names from the Clinton or Bush senior administrations? No, but a handful of names were Pentagon officials I recognized. A few from USDAT, one from another department, another from the National Security Council who was a Pentagon senior executive. The program manager told me that their efforts were not a weapons program, not an intelligence program, not a special ops or logistics program, and that it doesn't fit into any of those categories. So I just asked them, what exactly were they then? That caused the program manager to respond with a loud groan, and then the security director and attorney told him it's okay to say it. To say what? That they were a reverse engineering program that was established because something was recovered in the past. Some technological hardware was recovered. I automatically thought they meant recovered Soviet and Chinese hardware that they were reverse engineering. something like a missile or intel platform or aircraft. I actually came to the meeting expecting to find a sensitive foreign collection or reverse engineering operation. I thought UFOs were just used as a cover for that. So I told them that I thought it was a cover, but they assured me that they weren't that either. The program manager told me that they had a craft, an intact craft that they could fly. I asked if it was from overseas or not. They said no, it couldn't be. It's not possible. So I asked, where did it come from? The program manager said that they didn't know where it was from, but they had some ideas on its origin. Then they said that it was technology that was not of this earth, not made by man, not of human hands. They then said that they were trying to understand and exploit the technology. Their program had been going on for years and years with very slow progress, agonizingly slow, with little or no success. A painful lack of collaboration. They tried to get help from outside experts and to use external facilities to assist with the effort. But the program must remain isolated, and they could only use their own facilities and cleared personnel. It's a tough environment to work in. There's about 400 to 800 cleared employees that vary in number with the amount of funding and personnel changes. Miller then told me he asked about Roswell, the craft, the bodies, the autopsies. He asked about the Holloman Air Force Base landing. He asked about MJ-12 and leaked documents. He also asked about Socorro and Rendlesham. They were mum and declined to discuss these topics. I threatened to go to SAPOC to complain about them in order to gain access to their program. They said, go ahead and do what you must. I was angry because they denied my authority to be read in with good logical reason. They wouldn't budge. Their tone was very testy, very terse throughout the conversation. What was the outcome? The meeting broke up and I returned to Washington. What about Corso? Stephen Greer talked about Corso on April 9th. Will Miller showed me the Corso book during a 2-hour private conversation, but I didn't have time to read through it. Didn't end up buying a copy. I didn't bring up Corso during the meeting with the watch committee. But comparing the Corso story to what I had learned at the meeting was more than enough for me to believe that Corso had told the truth about seeing alien hardware. Did you end up complaining to SAPOC? Yeah, I called the senior review group members to a meeting at the Pentagon and told them what happened at the meeting. They responded by saying they would sustain the contractor on their access denial. So I ended up arguing with them for a while. Then we broke up after 20 minutes, but agreed to meet again in 2 to 3 days. When? We met in person before the last week of June in '97. They told me that they were going to be sustaining the contractor and that I was to immediately drop the matter and let it go. Forget about it because I did not have purview over their project, that it didn't fall within my oversight. I became angry. I started yelling when I should have kept my mouth shut. Will Miller and Stephen Greer said you nearly got busted. Close to that. I told Will Miller that the senior review group chairman said that if I didn't follow their suggestions, I would not see a promotion to the director of the DIA. I wouldn't get early retirement and I'd lose 1 or 2 stars along the way. I was really incredibly angry and upset over this. I was livid. Why was such a big deal being made over this? Considering the position of trust I have in the Pentagon, I do have relevant regulatory and statutory authority over their program. That's my position. Is it because funding comes from or through you, or is it the director of the DIA? That's a core secret. Can't answer. Well, back to the bigot list. Can you describe the types of people on it? Corporate types, scientists, technicians, engineers, managers. Any military organizations you recognized? None. Just OSDAT people and 2 on SAPOC and 1 other Pentagon office. In December '97, Paul was out as OSDAT and left the government, and Mike Kay was replaced too. By whom? Jacques Gansler was the new USDAT. He started in December '97, and Brigadier General M. Ward replaced Mike Kay. Were Paul Kaminsky, Mike Kostanek, Jock Gansler, and General Ward the ones on the bigot list you recognized? I won't answer that. I talked to Gansler in January of '98 about my June '97 meetings. He told me he was briefed by someone. That surprised me. What did he say? UFOs are real. So-called alien abductions are not real. At least that's what Gansler said. What else did he say? He told me to drop the matter. No more discussion about it. Are you willing to talk to Hal Puthoff and Kit Green? Wilson wasn't familiar with either of them, so I had to explain who they were and their history with the remote viewing program. He thought he might have heard of Hal before, but he had never heard of Kit Green before. I would prefer to never talk to anyone about this again. Every time I do, I risk exposure. I'd better stop talking about it. So what will you do with this information? I'm just going to keep it for private, personal use, use this information to track down the story and separate the signal from the noise in the media, as well as information from government sources. I'll keep my mouth shut. I then told Tom about Mary Elizabeth Elliott and the TRW story, as well as Ingo Swann's story and the story of the 1974 remote viewer who went to Wright Pat and was trying to make a connection. Mary Elliott sounds like the real deal based on her info and behavior, but she probably will only come totally clean on her deathbed 30 years from now. I don't know anything about Ingo Swann, Axelrod, or that remote viewer woman at Wright Pat. I never got around to looking into Corso. Do you have any material on him you could send me?